Let's see here. Give me another one. Let's say Raisa and Angela robbed a Texaco station of $350, 25.7 gallons of gas, 13 pints of Rick James wine, and a case of barbecue corn nuts. With their cash and supplies, they decided to begin new lives in the desert of West Texas. Petzmeyer, a newly transferred highway patrolman, stopped them for an ordinary traffic violation and discovered they are wanted in Maryland. Which of the following provisions would require them to be transferred back to Maryland for trial? Is it A, privileges and immunities, B, commerce, C, full faith and credit, or D, tax and spend?
C.
C, full faith and credit. Your names are going to be in the question, so be ready. And I'm giving you some tame ones right now. Trust me, they're going to get worse as far as the crimes that you commit. That's part of the fun. As you look at this, the articles. The Catholic school teacher article we spent a lot of time on. So have a good working knowledge of that. I mean, you almost have to. The eggs question is harder. I don't know if I've ever written a question on that one, but I probably should since we used it. The House clearing the records for the young felons, that's a really good one too. So two of these three are actually really good examples of things that would be probably essay type questions. The House one and the other one. We had the Indian Star, Khan. That one we spent a little bit of time on. Y'all didn't really get angry about it. So I don't know that it's going to be a big part of the test, but have a good idea. Heartbreak's Revenge is a really good one. And that's the one, you remember Heartbreak's Revenge?
Alienation of affection.
Alienation of affection, dealing with that North Carolina law. What was alienation of affection?
You can sue somebody that cheated, that had
The person who
fornications
stole
with
your
your wife.
affection.
Okay, you could sue the person that cheats with your spouse because they effectively stole the affection of your spouse.
Yeah.
Because it breaks or violates
Contract.
it violates the marriage contract. And you remember the Catholic school teacher was dealing with contract, and if you remember, the eggs were dealing with contract. So contract might be something to be thinking about.
What did it say about if they had no knowledge of their marriage?
That opens it up a little bit more, but I think what we had talked about in class was, come on, we all know. We all know. Yes.
Now, when you say be familiar with the articles, because you were like relating them to like specific things, we need to know those.
I would know the stories behind the Catholic school teacher one because that was the very first day. The alienation of affection, it's hard to go wrong with that one. Those two are winners every semester. The other ones, the Khan article dealing with flying while brown, that's probably better suited for a multiple choice question. And I would probably ask you something along the lines, know the facts of that one, and then I'll ask you something, what would likely happen next, kind of thing. Which of the following would most likely happen next? And as long as you can, the trick on this is to be able to relate the question back to one of the articles. And I'm going to ask it using almost verbatim or maybe just changing one fact in there, which could change around the answer. So just that's what I'm saying. The Hot Pursuit one. Race, I believe that one was where you gained some fame in class. The technology one with the OnStar. That one was one we covered, and you've actually got a link online. So remember, the links online. There's two Schoolhouse Rocks. There's the preamble, so you know there's got to be a preamble question somewhere because we've talked about it, and there's a link. And then the other one was fireworks for the Declaration of Independence. We've talked about it today, and there's a link. There's got to be questions on those. The OnStar one, there's a link and an article that we spent some time on in class, so some things there. The ERA, I don't remember if I posted the actual law. I think it's on there. If it's not, I'll get it on there. But remember that one, and again, we've talked about that one today. The articles, the FBI and the drug laws. That's something that we talked about a reasonable amount in class, so keep that one in mind. And again, on that one, maybe note the difference between weed and some of the harder drugs. You remember what that difference was?
Trying to get into the FBI?
What's that?
For people that are trying to be.
Yes, for people that are trying to get in there. What do we say?
Like
You can't have
more
smoked
than
like more than
15 times.
15 times.
15 times for weed.
more than
3
5
years
times.
ago.
3.
Or, okay, so a minimum of 3 years. If you can get in, if you have not used it within the last 3 years, and you've not used it more than 15 times in your life whenever. That was the old policy. And what was it for something like Coke?
10 years?
10 years and 5 times. And so they make some differentiations there. And the problem with this, this was kind of going back to freedom, order, and equality. And freedom, order, and equality are kind of big terms in this. When you think back to it, they're almost trying with this, they're, by eliminating certain freedoms, the irony is that they're also eliminating order. Because when you think about it, usually when you eliminate freedoms, you increase order. But here they're eliminating freedoms, which means the ability to use the weed, if you will. But in doing so, they're eliminating the amount of people that could conceivably apply for the FBI, which means they're actually taking out both of those in one fell swoop. So you're not getting a benefit. You're actually just getting a minus on both. Other articles. The war. What's the difference? What's the trick with war again?
We haven't actually been in one since World War II.
Okay, now that is true. World War II was the last time. Why do you say we haven't been in one since World War II?
There was no declaration of war.
That's the last time it was declared. And who declares war?
Congress.
Yeah, that's a really important thing. Congress declares war. The president can make war, or the president can execute the declaration. Assault on separation of powers. You already mentioned this one. Have a nice look at that one. What's the difference between separation of powers and checks and balances? Because I had drawn some boxes on this.
What's the separation of powers? Where they have their own, each branch has their own individual set of powers, and one cannot be have more power than the other one.
Absolutely. Separation of powers says, and I drew the 3 boxes up there, Article 1, Article 2, Article 3 creates 3 separate branches, and each one has its own specific powers that the other branches cannot violate. Separation of powers is this. Checks and balances, we've already defined, is the idea that while they can't violate those boxes, they do have checks to keep those boxes from growing too big. So the president vetoing a law, which is what we talked about, is a president check on Congress. Congress overriding the veto of 2/3, Pierce, you mentioned, is a check of Congress on the president. It becomes a law. The court striking down a congressional law is an example of the court checking the power of Congress. What was another example that I had given y'all from an article dealing with checks and balances in reference to the courts? What could Congress do to the courts?
They could create or eliminate seats.
They could set the membership for the actual Supreme Court. And we talked about this twice, I believe. Once it was in reference to the article, how they either could increase it if they liked the president or decrease it if they didn't. And we also talked about it in terms of the court packing plan, if you remember. The court packing plan with FDR in the federalism chapter. So something to think about there. Texas seceding from the Union, probably small. How to keep the Supreme Court in line. The budget activity. Okay, I'm going to post that today. There was a lot of good stuff that y'all brought up in the budget activity, but have a good working knowledge of those 2 articles. This little piggy goes to Congress. That's a really good one. And then the one about the spending figures, because y'all hit the spending figures almost exactly as we hit them today when we did that bonus activity. So that was superb, actually, today. Federalism articles. The death penalty. Death penalty, we spent a lot of time. I drew a lot of pictures on the death penalty. So be familiar, absolutely be familiar with that one. And then we talked about the weed article. I'm going to take out the New Jersey, Delaware article because we never once talked about it in class. So that's the one article that I'm going to remove, so you don't have to note anything with that. But the eggs article. Why don't you go ahead and remove the eggs article from chapter 1. So those. Now, jumping back, just any other questions that y'all had? Because I think that more or less covers the outline, or pardon me, the articles.
Are they all posted online now?
Yes, they are. All the articles are up there, and they're good to go. And with the chapter